Well, once again, it's September, which means it's time for the second, hopefully annual Simtember, where we play and talk about games that have simulator monikers typically attached to the title. This week's game is no exception to that, Tavern Manager Simulator, which should be pretty self-explanatory on what the goal of the game is, but if it's not, let me run it down for you. Yes, you now own a quaint little tavern on a tract of land in a remote medieval village. The problem is that the building itself needs a bit of work. Trash needs to be collected, boards pried off of doorways, dust covers placed over piles of debris that is too heavy to lift at the moment. Sadly, this kind of stuff is pretty typical for most business simulations that I've played like this. But fortunately, this is over within minutes, and you'll soon be pouring out ales for thirsty customers in no time. But first, you need to name your tavern. Although you can't name it whatever you want, there are a bunch of options to choose from, which seems to randomize some of the adjectives and nouns available, which is better than being forced to have a strict name that cannot be altered. Then it's time to pour some beer. Most items that are ordered in the game are prepared in a very small minigame sort of fashion. With beverage pouring, you simply hold down the left mouse button until the indicator lands in the green part of the meter. If you let go too early, no big deal, it's just considered a good beverage instead of a perfect one. But wait too long and you overfill the cup, causing spillage and somehow ruining the drink. Sure, you can still serve it, but I strive for perfection at the Prancing Dragon, and we don't serve subpar drinks here. Serving customers is easy enough. Patrons will approach the bar or table, and a bubble will appear over their head to show their desired order. Right-click the mouse to bring up a serving tray, and left-click desired items to transfer them to the plate. Then go to the customer, and left-click again to place ordered items in front of them, completing the order. You cannot give customers the wrong items. So say you have a wine, ale, and cheese on a serving plate, and the customer ordered ale, you can't accidentally serve them the wine or cheese. Yes, eventually you will serve food as well as drinks. At first, you get sausages, which are hung up on a rack and do not need to be prepared. But soup and steaks will eventually be unlocked and requested, which requires more items to create. Chop wood outside to stoke the fireplace. Bring in water from the pump to create the soup. For steak, you chop it up, throw it on the grill, and then flip it when the game signals it to cook up the best side of beef this side of Medieval Town. For the soup, after adding the water, throw in the veggies and stir it in a way that keep the needle in the green portion of the gauge until the time runs out. Seriously, these mini games aren't too intrusive, and it only takes a minute or so out of your day. But with that said, eventually, you are probably going to get overwhelmed. Not only are you serving tens of customers and preparing the food yourself, but you need to wash the dishes in the back room, scrubbing them with a sponge to remove the grime. Also, tables won't clean themselves, and these patrons are a dirty bunch. They'll spill ale and wine, and you'll use a cloth to clean it up. Not to mention removing the dirty cups and bowls and collecting the gold. People will also track dirty food prints throughout your tavern, and of course, you want to keep a clean place of business, so you'll be sweeping this up. You'll also occasionally see the most unclean of patrons arrive, denoted by a green gas cloud over their heads. They leave dirt and debris in their wake, which should be cleaned ASAP to prevent negative thoughts of your business. With all that said, you may want to hire help, and you can do so by taking fairies in. Fairies can be given a small handful of jobs. Cleaning the dishes, serving the food, and prepping the culinary delights, among other things, can be assigned to a fairy. All that they ask for in return is fairy dust, which helps motivate them to move slightly faster. With that said, though, one problem with the fairies is that, well, they're fairies. They're small little things and can only pick up one object at a time. They're also pretty slow, so it may take some time for them to complete an order delivery. If you decide to let one make your steaks or soup, or pour the beverages, you will only ever get normal quality products instead of perfect ones. I do not know if this alters the pricing, but I do think it changes the amount of reputation points you get for each successful order. Personally, I kept mine limited to cleaning and order delivery, and I made the drinks and food myself. Juggling all of your tasks isn't exactly easy, but the fairies do a pretty good job at giving you enough free time to be able to successfully run the tavern. But supplies need to be purchased with your hard-earned gold pieces, as do upgrades to the tavern. This is all done via the office/bedroom, in a room off to the side of the bar. In here, you can access a book to buy upgrades, such as an expanded tavern floor plan, more efficient stoves for soup and steak cooking, a water pump so you don't have to keep running outside to fetch a pail of water, and of course, the provisions themselves. Kegs of ale, meat for steaks, bags of vegetables for the famous soup, and so on. Between the upgrades and your supplies, it's hard to keep a large amount of gold on hand, but at least you can see the progress when you buy an upgrade. If you do tend to run low on gold, you can borrow against a bank run by goblins, but I didn't run into that need yet. Also of note is that the game helpfully tells you what supplies you have on hand when you are on the ordering screen, so there's no guesswork involved. I wish you could just type in the quantity you want to purchase, but instead, you just click once per unit, or shift click for 10. It works, but again, manually typing amounts would have been desired. Eventually, your tavern will become renowned enough that nobles will start to visit, and they won't be satisfied with the paltry beer and sausage that is offered. No, they desire cheese and wine. These are served in the same way as the ale and sausage, just in a different room to upscaled clientele. Thankfully, the fairies will help with this as well, unless you tell them not to, which is possible. Although you don't run into it with nobles, since they know how to handle themselves, occasionally you'll get a commoner that has a bit too much to drink. Thankfully, before they pass out on the bar, they'll pay their tab. In order to get rid of them, you have to walk up to them and left click, then drag their lifeless ragdoll body out to the street and throw them to the dirt. It's kind of fun to do, even if it does look a bit silly. If I do have one complaint with Tavern Manager Simulator, it's the lack of ambient noises. I really didn't notice it until someone had remarked on it in a Steam post, but now I can't unhear it. For a tavern, this place is quiet. No clinking glasses, no murmur of small talk, no sounds of vomit after a hard night of drinking. It's just way too quiet for a place that's supposed to be a bustling tavern. Sure, you can speak to your patrons, and they do have small one-liners that give a single point of reputation to you, but this is far from what I'm talking about. Hopefully this is something that gets patched in at some point. And yes, surprisingly, this game does get somewhat regular updates, at least as of the time of this review, with the latest patch being released on August 20th. At higher tavern levels, you can hire a bard, the king will come to check to see what all the fuss is about, and you can apparently buy magical flowers that speed up the fairy workers. I haven't gotten to that level yet, but I do look forward to it. And there's also a hotel that can be built. It's expensive to do so, with a human contractor hosting goblin workers standing outside of your tavern, waiting for your deposit before starting. I can't wait till I accumulate enough gold to see what this is all about. Finally, the art style of the game is truly captivating. Most simulator games try going for a somewhat realistic look, but not Tavern Manager. Visuals are slightly cartoonish in nature, and it fits the style of the game, as it makes it feel somewhat serious, but yet still somewhat comical. And that's Tavern Manager Simulator. It looked fun on the Steam page, and after playing it for a bit, I can say that it has its hooks in me. A lot of times, these simulator-style games don't have a lasting appeal, as you buy everything available within 5 to 6 hours, and then you have nothing left to do with the game but watch your bankroll increase. But that's not the case here. I've got almost 12 hours into the game, and I can say that there's still plenty that I haven't seen. This game is easily worth the $13 asking price that the game currently commands on Steam. So if you are a fan of business sims, then Tavern Manager Simulator is worth it. So come visit me at the Prancing Dragon Tavern. The first ale is on me. Final score, 6 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.